Afternoon, Maddie's Auto Repair. Let's do some automotive shit today. 2010 Dodge Journey. Gentleman reached out because other than a few other complaints, huge power steering leak and some other things we're doing. We had the front trailing arm bushings, as you can see. When this was in the vehicle, I had to air hammer this out of the control arms on both sides here. Wasn't even attached, arms just flopping around. Obviously alignment angles are going to be off, but what the previous shopper, whoever looked at this thing, did not note is a whole host of other bushings. When it comes to the other arms, there's two lower control arms and upper arm. So we're getting this all dialed in. Fairly cheap compared to other shops. We're gonna end up putting in, Brandon, zoom in up here, the upper control arm is now going to be this adjustable deal, so they can take this to an alignment shop, which hopefully we'll be having dialed in here sooner than later, maybe by the end of the year. But they'll be able to adjust the camber on the rear wheels, which a lot of times, and I can tell you from experience, and I can tell you from the lazy technicians in town and some of the other shops, when they come across the seize bolt, toe is adjustable and camber theoretically is adjustable in the rear on something like this Dodge Journey, the sport utility vehicle. Or you can add aftermarket upper control arms like I'm putting in it, because the springs, things just sag over the years. It's important to have your alignment angles in, because one of the other items that he was concerned about was, we don't have the tire because it's back in the tire pile, but his tire, the camber, way off. There were cords on the inside and then plenty of tread left on the outside. So a lot comes back to the rear suspension. When you take your alignment into any alignment shop in town, make sure you're asking, if it's not like a truck and a solid rear axle, that something like this Dodge Journey, there are adjustments. Now, granted, the environment that we live in and the conditions with ice, salt, and snow, the toe link that I had here, I had to end up cutting the bolt off. And what's going to happen is when they end up taking the bolt and the cam loose and they try and adjust that toe link out to adjust the toe in the rear, a lot of times it's frozen, because guess what doesn't ever usually get moved? The front tie rods, you can take a torch to, you can heat up and move them, but guys tend to overlook the rear specs, or they'll just bypass it, or they'll play the head game and move the head so the angles are in the green. When I end up getting an alignment rack here, we're going to be doing things the way it should be done. If you can't move something like this, it needs to get replaced. This was a cheap cam kit. I think 14 bucks from Napa was my cost. We're already replacing the link. I have bushings here that we're going to end up throwing in the knuckle. We're going to take care of all the worn and loose bushings and everything. It was more than just the control arm or the trailing arm flopping around. And again, if somebody was doing this in your backyard, hey, more power to you. But I don't think you realize just these knuckle bushings. Brandon, kind of zoom in here. When you get one of these that you have to get out, the center's going to be degraded. I ended up with my fancy, this was $800 back in the day, this ball joint press from Snap-on. I guarantee you it's probably $1,000 or more now. But this thing is really handy. I end up punching out the center bushing, getting the bolt out of there, and then there's the little collar that's around. Well, guess what? Over the years with the rust and corrosion, there ain't much left to that. So, a couple of tips and tricks. If you had an exact cup that fit this Journey and fit the knuckles so it would slide in there and get it center perfect with the ball joint press, great. I don't have that. I'm sure they make one. But if you get a fine chisel, and you get right on the edge of it and kind of knurl it over, you can then take, your fancy air hammer here and then just pound the collar out of there, clean it up, and guess what? Look at what I'm doing now. Basically sucking the bushing back in, and I got two more to do on this, and it'll go great. So, and again, this gentleman will be able to take this into an alignment place and they'll be able to dial this completely in, dial in the rear camber, dial in the rear toe. Again, I'm telling you, I know from experience, I know from the people I've worked with, I know from the shit I see from some of the shops in town on a routine basis, because even though I don't have the computer yet in the alignment rack, you can eyeball some of this stuff. And they routinely go in for alignments, and guess what's never touched? Your rear suspension. And it's important because even if you rotate your tires and your camber's off in the rear, you're going to end up with a tire that's worn like shit, and tires are expensive. So important that when you're getting into some type of job like this and you're looking at bushings that were completely blown out, I look at the whole picture. I'm not like the shops in town where they gotta do free oil changes just to get people in, give them a $5,000 estimate. I had a really good conversation with this customer. I didn't give him an estimate beforehand. This is how I work. I checked it all over. The vehicle's in fairly good shape for a 10 or 11 or whatever. Was well worth putting the little bit of money, but he's saving a ton compared to going to a normal shop in town. $70 an hour, no upcharge on parts. So we'll get him dialed in with the other issues by the end of the weekend here, hopefully, and he'll be on his way. So make it a great Saturday.